All right, then. Looks like we have critical mass here. I will go ahead and get started. If for some reason you cannot hear me, definitely put something in the Q&A or the chat. But I am really excited to have Oscar Munoz here today, the former CEO and chairman of United Airlines. I'm going to do a little bit more of an introduction to him in just a minute. First, I want to introduce what is 47G. Why are we hosting this webinar today? What are we doing here in Utah? And then I'd like to introduce our Director of Aeronautics here in Utah, Matt Moss. So 47G is Utah's Aerospace and Defense Association, together with the defense primes and the commercial aerospace companies that all the major ones have a presence here in Utah. Together with them, we're building the world's premier ecosystem for aerospace defense and cybersecurity, all of the critical industries that we need for a safe and prosperous world. So I wanted to introduce a few of those companies here that we work with. You'll see, as I mentioned, the defense primes there, and we work with a lot of small and mid-sized companies in aerospace and defense, helping with government contracting, with networking, with hiring and talent development. We also get to work with here's another few companies that are on our board of governors here. Many of them advanced air mobility companies, which we'll be talking about today with Oscar. So you'll see Zipline and Bristow and others who have a presence in the advanced air mobility sector. Electrify is on here as well, and there's certainly others. We also work with the universities and government partners here in Utah to get all these things done. And so here are some of those companies. So we are excited to have Matt Moss, our Director of Aeronautics here. He has done a wonderful job making Utah a hub for aviation and the aerospace business. And so I wanted to turn the time over to Matt for a few minutes to introduce himself and let us know what's going on in Utah before we jump into this webinar. So over to you, Matt. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Robert. As Robert mentioned, I'm the director of UDOT Division of Aeronautics for here in the state of Utah. And I just want to thank 47G for hosting this webinar with Oscar Munoz and for what they're doing for aerospace and defense in the state of Utah. I appreciate the great working relationship between 47G and UDOT Division of Aeronautics. So Robert did reach out to me and asked if I'd take a few minutes this morning at the beginning of the webinar to give a brief update about where we are and where we're heading with advanced air mobility in the state of Utah. I will be very brief as I want to leave as much time as I can for Oscar and his remarks. So with that, current state of advanced air mobility in the state, you know, some fantastic things, great things are happening. I really wanted to start out in talking about Point of the Mountain development and what's going on down in Vineyard as well. Alan Matheson and his team at the Point, and Mayor Julie Fulmer and her team in Vineyard. You know, these are forward-thinking leaders that as they're going through these major business and community developments in their areas, that, you know, they're integrating advanced air mobility into their planning. And so this is something that is fantastic and that they're positioning themselves for the future, again, because of the forward thinking that they possess. Another thing, Utah is only one of 2 states that has both Zipline and Drone Up doing small UAS package delivery, which I think is pretty exciting. Also, we just signed a MOU agreement with Jump Aero. And Jump Aero is a company that is looking to do high-speed emergency medical personnel in the state of Utah. And their vision is to be able to get emergency medical personnel anywhere in the state in 8 minutes. So they've got a high-speed eVTOL that they're developing, and we're working with them here in the state of Utah. And I think what will happen is that what we develop here in the state will be a blueprint for rollout in other areas of the country and the world. So what we're currently doing, though, in the state is we've got a couple studies that we're doing. One study is looking at uncrewed traffic management system implementation. In addition to that study, we're also looking at sandbox or a test site development for the state. We're taking a look at micro weather reporting, and then a critical piece to advanced air mobility is community outreach and education. One additional piece of a study that we're doing is vertiport integration into the state and existing infrastructure. So probably if we're looking to the future, both near term and a little bit further out, I think in the next 12 to 16 months, really what we want to see here in the state of Utah is we do want to see an operating sandbox test site in the state, and then also an implementation of some sort of scalable uncrewed traffic management system. I think the next steps after that, we'll see some heavy cargo and ag drones happening in the state. And then, as I talked about with our MOU with Jump Arrow, the emergency medical personnel transport. So, and then eventually air taxis. Air taxis are definitely going to play a part of advanced air mobility in the state of Utah. So, but I would be remiss if I also didn't mention that there's a lot of work being done in Utah with electrification of traditional aircraft. So I definitely have to mention that. And to be honest, that will probably have the electric traditional aircraft take the skies before any advanced air mobility aircraft. So there is so much that we're doing in the state of with aviation, UAS, AAM, but I really don't want to take any more time away from Oscar. So I will just throw out there, please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or comments about the direction that we're moving in the state of Utah. So thank you very much. And again, appreciate 47G for just allowing me a few minutes to talk about the direction that we're heading in the state with advanced air mobility. Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, Matt. Awesome stuff. And, Utah really is a leading state when it comes to advanced air mobility. And we are in discussions with all sorts of companies. In fact, Archer is serving on a study group at the Utah Division of Aeronautics, and Oscar is on the board of Archer. And so we'll be talking about Archer today. So glad to have that connection with Archer is very active in Utah, and Oscar is helping guide that company as a board member. So thank you, Matt. We'll let you go off camera, and Oscar, we'd love for you to join us. I would love to introduce you briefly. Hi, everybody from Oscar. Oscar is the former CEO and chairman of United Airlines and serves on the board of directors of several companies, including Salesforce, Televisa Univision, Archer Aviation, which we'll be talking about today. Archer is one of the leading, and some would say even the leading, advanced air mobility company building electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Oscar also has served on the Pentagon's Defense Business Board. He's a trustee of the University of Southern California and the Brookings Institution, as well as an independent trustee for Fidelity. He's the author of a recent memoir, which is called Turnaround Time. We'll be talking about that book today. I really enjoyed reading it. Here's what it looks like. I downloaded it on Kindle. The foreword is by Walter Isaacson, who's one of my favorite authors, wrote Benjamin Franklin and Elon Musk. And actually, I think I have one or two of his books behind me here today. So thank you, Oscar, for joining us today. I think there's a lot we can discuss. And I'd like to kick it off with a question about when you first started as CEO of United Airlines, one of the world's largest airlines in the top 3. Something really drastic happened in your personal life. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Hey, Robert, how are you? Nice to see you. It was great to hear. If I could, just a quick pre-mumble for everyone. First of all, thanks everyone for joining. Often I'm asked, why would you choose to join something like this? I just think what Matthew went through and what Utah is doing, I just wish, honestly, a lot of the rest of the country would pay attention to the incredible opportunity that lies ahead of us, right? We've had very little revolutionary development in the space of aeronautics and aviation, certainly my old world. And so it's great to see a state organization actually having that kind of foresight and that kind of support. And I think it's important how much that will help a lot of the fledgling issues that we have out there, Archer being one, Boom and others. So it's great to see everybody represented here. So thank you for having us. Second, thanks for pushing the book, or at least pointing it out. I never thought I'd become an author. There's a lot in there that talks about a lot of issues, but primarily the driving point, just so everyone knows, because I think it's important to me. This was never a book about look at me, and a lot of memoirs are like, oh, I did this and I did that. This book is a lot about I screwed up this, and here's how we recovered, and here's how to look at the things that face us in not only business, but a lot of personal life stories in there that you all as humans go through. And to that end, your question on with regards to what happened early in my career. So 37 days into the job, and it was a full 37 days, as you might imagine, when you take over a new company. Had gone on something called a listening tour and had really hit a lot of nooks and crannies of every airport that United operates across the country, and a couple even outside the country. And so I've been busy doing what I called listening and learning. Everybody asked, what are you going to do first? My answer to the street when they ask the question they want to hear, we're going to shut this down. We're going to fire these people, right? They always want to hear those very tangible, sort of Excel spreadsheet oriented sort of answers. And my answer was a simple, I don't know yet, but I'll let you know soon, as after I get back, because while I had lots and lots of information from consultants, from my senior team, certainly my board, clearly our customers and what they thought needed to be fixed, what was missing from that equation was the people that actually run the business every day and touch your bags, touch your aircraft, touch your coffee, and of course the important avionics and throttles and management of an aircraft itself. So I went on this listening tour. So 37 days roughly of doing that, I came back to Chicago, went on a run, and suffered what was from all accounts, a heart attack that should have killed me. And thankfully it did not. Let me do the PSA, I think, because that's probably an important aspect of that. Heart disease is the biggest killer in America, by far. It's like it doesn't even come close to anything else you might imagine. What about cancer? Cancer's got nothing on heart disease, unfortunately. Why is that? It's because the symptoms that we have from heart disease are many and varied and differ from men to women. And so there is no clutching of the chest. It's like, oh my God, it's the big one. It has nothing to do with that. There's just so many different ones that you can't always really tell. You can't just say, hey, if you're feeling this. I have a friend who, by the way, I was running marathons. I did triathlons beforehand. I was a vegan. Yeah, I was a vegan. It's a long story about how I got to that point, but nevertheless, so you wouldn't think I would be a candidate for that sort of thing. But my friend would always say, you'd be surprised at how relatively young and fit people are that die on my operating table because these symptoms down, or I'm going to sit for a few minutes. Blockage of your arteries, main arteries in and out of your heart to your vital organs. When blood doesn't get there, stuff dies, and then you die afterwards. And one of the more telling things he told us one day, my friend, who's a cardiologist, and I did these races with him, he said, all the things I just said, but increasingly he would say, if you ever feel anything weird, just call 911, because the worst you can be is embarrassed that you have indigestion or something. But then he added a couple of things that seemed a little dramatic. First of all, he said, and when you call 911, immediately tell them where you are. It's like, duh, and that makes sense. But immediately tell them where you are, because you may not make it past the phone call. And I remember exactly where we were and how I saw him, and it was like, oh my God, Mark, that's his name. Like, it's a little dramatic. But fast forward a couple of years, I'm in my 37th day of my new job at United. I've been on this listening tour round the clock. And for all of you that aviation, there isn't a 9 to 5 kind of job. I mean, I've been in hangars in the middle of the night. I've been early morning for we call it start the airline right meetings. And so full days across the country going back and forth. So yeah, I was tired, but not that tired. I'd just gone on a run, and I am making my vegan protein shake, and I hear my phone buzzing across my little rental apartment. And so I go, I hadn't spoken to my wife yet that morning, And as I moved to get the phone, my legs sort of gave out. They kind of felt a little what I call Gumby or weird. And I remember it's like, okay, I didn't run that far or that hard. Phone kept buzzing, took 2 more steps, and my legs actually gave out. And then I felt a little clamminess. So those were my 2 and only symptoms. But for that conversation with Mark, my friend, I would have said, oh, that's kind of weird. I answer the phone, talk, sit there and lay there. And again, the concept is you may not make it past the phone call, came rushing to me. So I called 911, and indeed, it's like the story is kind of crazy because 37 minutes into the job, 37 minutes later from when I called 911, I was being put on a medically induced coma and on life support system with the artificial heart and lung machine. That's how I took the widowmaker, that concept that people talk about, and gave it the middle finger, says one of my doctors. And so that was my experience. And again, but for that wise thing. So I share all of that with you. Ever feel anything weird, just do something. Don't just sit there, because unfortunately that's what drives a lot of the fatalities in there. So fast forward a few months, weeks, ended up having a heart transplant. Again, another wonderful story. The heart that I have in me today is it's 37 now, I think. So keep that framework. But it came on the morning of my birthday. So my birthday, my doctor calls and says, "Hey, we got a kick-ass heart for you." And so yeah. I went into the office for the day, did some great stuff there that we were finishing up, and then went to the hospital later that day. My farewell to many was nobody knew what I was doing, because again, public company CFO, all of this has got to be kept quiet. No one can know, because it requires all sorts of things. So I just kind of tell them, "Hey, I got this thing at the hospital I got to go do. I will see you on the other side," was my famous phrase. And as I think back about it now, it's like, oh crap, that could have meant a couple of things. But I'm glad to be on this side, by the way. So that's the quick story.
So that's an incredible story. And the wild thing is, it happened right at one of the biggest moments of your career. You had just started at United, and Wall Street had expectations of you. Your employees had expectations, just tens of thousands of employees. So what was the response? How did all of these stakeholders respond to you going through this health crisis that took a lot of your time and attention away?
Well, I don't know initially, but I've been able to. But obviously, I was kind of out of it. I did somehow get information out when I got to the actual hospital. My name, rank, and serial number, so they could call my wife, etc. But I also kept muttering something underneath my voice. And Dr. Flaherty, one of the receiving doctors, tells this story to this day. Because you kept saying something, so I leaned closer. I kept saying, "I don't have time for this. I don't have time for this," which all of you on the call will understand, totally on brand for most of us, right? It's like, I don't have time for this. So again, another very heartwarming story to me, because in that 37 days on that listening tour, I had created enough of an impetus, enough of a light at the end of the tunnel that wasn't an incoming train, enough of hope in people that maybe we were headed in the right direction. Again, a short time to do that, but there's a way that leaders should listen and understand before they lead people, which I think I do well. And we had created that bond. And again, we had I think 8 or so CEOs in the previous decade at United. So you can imagine the employees were like, "Oh God, here's just another dude showing up, and he's gonna do this and then go off in his merry way. Nothing's really gonna change." So in that short time, we were able to really connect with a lot of these folks. And so the response to your question was amazing. I mean, the amount of so I had to go into this hospital under an assumed name. Nobody knew where I was. Press was looking for me. I still have a video that the CNBC folks put together for me of all the talking heads. They're like, "Oh, once it was learned that it was a heart attack," and then later when I was going to get a transplant, all the people say, the experts, he'll never make it. His mental acuity will never be the same. People don't live long after transplants. And, everybody has all that stuff and hearing all this dramatic. I love that video because I know the people on it by and large. And as I'm now a CNBC contributor and I do a lot of things all over the place. So I'm always in green rooms. one of the funnest moments of my life is when I see some person that's there. It's like, how do you love me now, buddy?
Yeah, proved you wrong.
So there was a huge media outcry about, hey, he's a public figure. He doesn't, the whole kind of privacy and medical issues doesn't apply to him. He's chosen to be public. So there was that debate. There was, of course, investors like, what the heck's going on? Who's going to, we had to name an interim CEO, was my general counsel. And my appointment had created quite a little bit of noise because I was from outside the industry, right? I was running a big airline, a big railroad, logistics, labor. So all the fundamentals were there, but the airline space wasn't that. So there was a lot of question about what I was going to do. So you have that fury. Now you have investors. So most people were like, okay, this seals the deal. Why don't we move on and find somebody else? The employees were a very different story, and just literally bags of mail would arrive at my apartment, and my kids would bring it every day in a bag, and we would have this thing that everybody dubbed the morning reading, and my kids would read these wonderful notes from people at United. Hey, get better, get back. was always a lot of that. The doctors and nurses would come and listen to that. So the other question is, why did you go back after you go through all of this? Like, do you really have to prove anything? It wasn't a proof point. It was a company in need, and I really thought I could help. And that outreach and that emotion that was expressed to me and my family, you can't repay that. Yep. And so it was never a doubt. Now, my doctors had a completely different sort of prognosis for me, because no one comes back from this is a pretty bad one. But again, it's for all of us. You're keeping healthy in general is never a bad thing, because stuff happens. And then also this kind of concept of mind over body. I never once, I was miserable, pain and all that. Never once that I didn't think I was going to be coming back.
Amazing story. That was one of your, certainly one of the big moments from a press perspective of your career. Another big one I'd love to touch on is several of us remember a few years ago, Dr. Dow, a passenger on a United flight, being dragged off the flight with blood on his face. That was a huge moment on social media and on the national news and on television. What did you learn from that experience, and what would you say is your leadership style coming out of that experience? And generally, what is your philosophy on leadership? So can you talk to us about the Dr. Dow incident?
Yeah, I'll save the leadership stuff maybe for kind of a sub question, but this is an important question, and thanks for asking that. A lot of folks are like, "Oh gosh, Oscar, do you mind if we talk about that or whatever?" It's like, bring it. There is nothing in your personal development, life, career, and personal, all of the whole spectrum, that you don't learn the most ardent lessons other than the stuff you really messed up, right? And so the lesson, as you ask, is it is never too late to do the right thing. And the principles are as follows. So what did I learn? First of all, it was a Twitter viral thing before Twitter viral things were a thing. We've checked. We don't know that there's another global brand. I think we were the first to do that. I knew what Twitter/X was at the time. We didn't know the reach. We didn't know how it was early. It was 2017. It seems like, well, it's been around forever. Actually, not to the degree that it is now. So first learning was this concept of social media was real. We got 800 million views rumored on Weibo, which is the Chinese sort of mechanism.
Oh, really?
So yeah, I became globally infamous really, really quickly. The response initially when this happened, so thank you. You said drag. The guy was beaten and dragged. We all saw the video. We all cringed. I cringed. And the question becomes, what in the world possessed you to answer a question? So it happened. Somebody in the back room responded to Twitter about using the term overbooking. We apologize for the overbooking. Overbooking caused this situation. And for all of us, and you all are associated with this industry in a lot of ways, and the regulatory overhang we have on so many of our initiatives and how important they are. Overbooking in the commercial aviation industry is a really, if ever that becomes a regulatory rule that we cannot do that, it will impact the relatively small profitability of these airlines a lot, because as you know, people book seats and they don't show up, and empty seats fly, and you have all the associated costs. So the first concern from the organization was the regulatory overhang of the use overbooking and how to change that. It was not how a human being was treated or mistreated, as the case may be. So that's the first lesson. Get your stuff right first, because obviously, I mean, all you have to do is watch it. I always kid. I should have made us watch that for, as many times as it took for somebody to get physically ill, because it wouldn't have taken long, as you'll see. So you ask the question, well, it's like, given that, what possessed you to use the word reaccommodated as opposed to overbooking? Well, the regulatory, get rid of that word, the fast pace of that, and it was just a Twitter response. It was like kind of like, well, and again, I own that. I mean, they attribute it to me, and it was put there, and it went, it just went out, and of course that just escalated the issue to some massive degree, and it just got out of hand even more, because the second instinct for me was to protect my employees. The individual involved, the passenger, was not a good human being. He had a very sordid history, and we learned that very quickly. So all of a sudden, it kind of felt like, wait, we didn't do anything wrong. This person sort of fought with police, not United employees. It wasn't. It was United Express. It wasn't our policies. There was so many things to be done and said that it wasn't us. So the initial instinct was to protect ourselves. So I went there again. And of course, that made it even worse, because it's like, okay, they just beat the holy crap out of this guy, and now they're blaming him, right? It's just, you think about when you think about it from apart from the situation, it's moving quickly. We've got a lot of other things going on. This one didn't seem like a big deal until, of course, it was. The concept of it's never too late to do the right thing happened, and the next day, as we prepped for what was going to be a very seminal moment on live TV, Good Morning America. Let's catch 30, 40 million people in America who can't wait to watch this show, right? Yet another CEO who's kind of like blah, 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 and this, and then try to squeeze, and then they're all prepped to kind of, we've all seen those videos of people doing that and how disingenuous they seem and disconnected from the truth. And so I was being prepped to manage that. Importantly, to tell the real facts. It was not United Airlines. It was the Chicago Police Authority. It was this, and this. And so as we're working through that, and I stop and I go home to try to get some sleep before the early morning call. There's a lot of this in my book with regards to the dormant values that are inside all of us, but from early on. And mine was from my maternal grandmother, who I grew up with. My mom was a single mom, left to go make a better life for herself for a while, and I stayed with my grandmother to get my stuff. It's an immigrant story. This was all in northern Mexico, so all of that comes into play a little bit, but mostly this woman just never complained, never blamed anyone, worked her ass off. And we had some difficult times when I remember as a young kid, sort of traipsing around the dusty roads of northern Mexico on trains and buses. And that night, who she was and what she instilled in me over those times kind of really came to things like, I just sitting there and said, gosh, do I really want to get on there and try to blame other people and point the finger and say, gosh, it's not you? And that just didn't feel to me like the right thing to do based on those dormant latent values that I had. So I went back to bed. I don't know if I slept, but I did feel a lot more calm. I didn't know what I was going to say or do, but I knew I wasn't going to say and do what everybody sort of had suggested that I do. So went live. Everybody's ready. Very tense, awkward moments that morning. I still remember vividly. Lights go on, and this person is just ready to go after me, and she does. And what did you think? I said it was horrific. She was taken aback by that. I guess I said it's not what I saw; it's how it made me feel. And then the question to, how did this happen? And this, I said, it was nobody else. I let the policies and procedures of running an airline get in the way of doing the right thing for another human being. And that should never and will never happen again on our airline. And there was a definitive statement that just came out, because the buck stops here. There is zero I mean, how can you make an excuse for beating the living heck out of someone the way they would do, whether you did it or not? It was your thing. And by that time, it was 3 days into this thing, and it was just, it had a head of steam, and it was just going to invite so many more things. So I just decided that, again, based on those latent values, to say, you know what, it's mine. And it's not without its consequences, without its benefits. The first benefit is there's nowhere for them to go, because it's like, wait, he just said he owns that. He just said it's his fault. He just said it's never going to happen. By the way, we laid out some things we were going to do in the next 30 days to make up for some of this.
Yep.
So they had nowhere to go, and you could hear her earbuds just going off with, ask him this, ask him that. But the louder gasp was my team behind me, right? The legal corp com team, who's like, wait, he's not supposed to say that.
Not supposed to say that, yeah.
And the lesson to your question, long-winded way, for all of you on this call, you will face your Dr. Dow moment, and there will be nobody else. Zero, lonely at the top, and all buck stops here, all of that stuff in all of your lives, personal or professional. You're going to face a moment like this, and you should prepare for what are your true principles and values, because again, it's never too late to do the right thing. And in my case, the truth is really will set you free. I knew even then, back in my sort of nascent thought, it's like, you know what, this is something I'm going to have to answer for the rest of my life. And to be able to try and remember all the spin and all the things, well, if you remember, Robert, it was this and that. It's like, okay, this is going to get to be really old sounding over time. And to all of us who have BS meters that are off the charts when it becomes the trust and transparency, human principles, it was going to come across that way. So that's the truth. That's what happened. And the lesson I learned is simply, it's never too late, go do the right thing. And, we came out of it well. And it was actually even the catalyst for a lot of customer-centric things, not only us at United, but it's become a thing across the industry where we now actually seemingly care more about you.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and certainly some powerful leadership lessons, and United Airlines has done really well since then, barring the pandemic and the recovery from that pandemic. I want to switch gears to advanced air mobility. I see a question or two coming in, so folks on the call, please feel free to put some questions in the Q&A there. Oscar, I can see you wearing your Archer swag today. Really cool jacket. Oh, there you go. Oh, and the Boom Supersonic. There you go. So Boom is a supersonic jet that can get you from New York to London in the same time as maybe the Concorde. So maybe a couple hours. Is that right?
Yep. On sustainable aviation. Well, yes, obviously cuts the time at least in half. Sustainable aviation fuel, very different than the old Concorde in the sense that certainly the same supersonic speed. I think certification should happen quickly because it's just a Part 135. It's not a new thing.
Right.
The commercial track is meant to be one that is accessible. It is not going to be a ridiculously priced thing. It'll roughly be the cost of a Polaris, a United business class seat to wherever you want to go. So it's not meant to be so exclusive. So it's accessible to all generally. Obviously sustainable, which is a process that, regardless of your politics, we should be all exploring the concept of how that can benefit our planet. And so it's exciting to be part of that. So yes,
really
ask
cool.
away.
Good. No, United certainly made some early and really strong bets. Boom is just an incredible company. Blake Scholl, an incredible founder. Archer, I know the team there, really, really smart, really sharp people. So tell me, what is it that, let's specifically focus on the eVTOL market and Archer. eVTOL aircraft have quite a bit of headwinds, both from regulators, from communities who may or may not want the aircraft, and then also from consumer adoption. Are people going to be ready to get in these aircraft, ready to pay, and take these short flights from the airport to their destination? So given all those headwinds, what is it that you see in Archer, and why did you choose, as the United CEO, to make that early partnership with them and make that bet? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and all of you in this industry are so keenly aware of the lack of true revolutionary developments in how we move humans around the planet. our aircraft has certainly become more fuel efficient. They are faster, they're better. But yeah, we have an air traffic control system in America that just, excuse the technical term, sucks. And it's like we're building these Ferraris and then forcing them to drive on these gravel driveways. And so we're just slowing everything down. So the increase in fuel efficiency, the cabin, the entertainment, the food, I guess we can all debate that necessarily. There really hasn't been anything sort of really, sort of changing. I mean, we call it the concept of change makers, and we often overuse that term because nothing has really changed. So this concept of what could be around the corner, where we as a company, United, could get kind of at the start of it and help build and help bring to market these kind of unique products. So as you describe the points of contention or issues and obstacles and barriers, I think the third one you mentioned is probably the least of our concern, honestly. Demand, again, you don't want to overplay that too early, but there's not a place I speak or we speak or wherever we go around the world where it's like, would you like to get from downtown O'Hare, from downtown Chicago to O'Hare in under 10 minutes? I mean, it's like there's no yes, put me in, coach. How much will it cost? Again, it's an accessible cost model that will be priced over time, but it's not meant to be accessible only to sort of the blade operators and those kind of folks, which have a great service, but it's expensive, so they have to charge. This is call it roughly potentially the cost of an Uber black car or a black car service that you would possibly as a business person even take to the airport. So for that price to be able to take, and all of us that live in crowded cities, like obviously I lived in Chicago, I lived 19 miles from the airport, and I went to that airport a lot over the course of my tenure there. And I could spend 20 minutes getting to the airport, or I could spend 3 hours getting to the airport. And the weird part is I never knew which one I was going to offer. The price of admission to have a consistent shuttle-like revolving service between those two locations, the demand is there. The regulatory front, I think two things. Importantly, and this is why Archer was such a treat for us, because they understood how to bring things to market. Can you scale? Can you grow? Can you get it authorized? Can you get it approved to fly? The building of that aircraft that you see in front of us from not day one, but certainly very early on, has been built as much as we can in conjunction, aligned with the FAA. So they're watching literally every screw and nut and bolt and any component going in there, so that they see how this thing is built from the ground up. So we don't present them an aircraft and then they have to tear it all down and it's going to take. So let's work alongside with them. The second section was really around building an aircraft for commercial availability. This is not a toy. This is not something we want to look. We want to get it in the market, and we got to get it in the market soon. Autonomous thing is really cool. It is obviously, probably more than likely, very much a possible future thing. But as hard as the regulatory barriers to get a brand new aircraft flying in this weird spectrum of airspace that they're going to have to share with others and all the issues you can come up with here, getting something approved that's also autonomous, I think, is a bridge too far, at least at this point. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. So that concept was a really good one. And then third, I forget the first point you raised with regards to barriers, but this is the Jetsons. So there is a creative, accepting mode of the world. And now, we've had Tesla, we've had all sorts of products that have come up that no one would have ever thought about. So the mindset of the consumer is not to a place, this is doable. And so I have a phrase I use constantly, proof, not promise. And so what we're doing at Archer, and again, I'm also an investor, so it's important for everyone to know that, not an insignificant investor as well as a board member. But the concept of getting to market and getting to market soon, getting it approved through the right channels, creating a demand that I think is out there and accessible to all is great. And it's kind of a cool thing. It's like, and the way we're going to use it, at least at the airlines, is, United will have its own aircraft. And when you book a ticket from, my example, Chicago to San Francisco, when you book that ticket, there'll be another little add-on. Would you like to archer to the airport as well? And you say, well, yeah, cool. For this, you add it onto your ticket and you go to the right vertiport. I heard Matthew talk about vertiports as well. So, all that infrastructure has got to be done. And then lastly, at least for me personally, not only as an investor, but as a board member, it's going to be difficult. Of course it is. This is how great new things come. It's going to be hard, but having folks like myself and a lot of other great people on the board to lead through this, it's exciting. Now, the technical aspect, the battery power, all the components, you do. A lot of you know this space. So you know that every single angle, fraction, the landing gear, why it's built the way, why it looks that way, all of that has gone through amazingly difficult standards, and we have some of the best and brightest. We've attracted people from every company. I mean, we have probably more Tesla folks than anyone that's been able to attract, because people like that. What do they want to do? They want to work. Back to your question, something that's just really friggin' cool and attainable, and I want to be part of that. And if we think about back to BlackBerry and all the things, I just watched that movie. Came to mind. Trying to avoid that end necessarily, but it's a really exciting product that I think is going to really help, because beyond the shuttle to the airport, it really is going to, if you want to think about inclusion, you open up places to people in an inner city that they've not been able to get to for a relatively minor cost. You open up all these wonderful destinations. I grew up in LA, and there's so much to do. We would kid when I was a kid that I could go surfing in the morning and skiing in the afternoon, or vice versa, and still get a round of beach volleyball in, because it was really accessible. You can't do that anymore. You can't do that anymore at all. You can't fly from Denver city to the ski resorts because it's just the crowds on I-70 are so bad. All of that life, think of the revolutionary, which is then I come back to the whole concept of Jetsons. And I remember even as a kid, I would watch that and it was like, why are they not crashing to each other? All of those thoughts are going into the development of this product.
Yep. Well, Archer just signed a major agreement with the United Arab Emirates. They have a significant investment from the U.S. Air Force. Oscar, when do you suspect we will be able to get it on a United Archer flight from Newark to Manhattan, or from Chicago to downtown? When should we be expecting to see that?
Well, let me give you the exact date right here, and then really piss off Adam and his IR team about giving forward-looking guidance. So,
yeah, do we have any press here? That would be perfect.
So again, we do have a stated time. I think it's first quarter of 25 when we're going to have things in the air. When they're going to be in market will depend on the people we sell them to, for sure. And but again, the long pole in the tent, as that phrase goes, will be the FAA sort of authority to fly them and getting that certificate. And that is something we are loath to just, well, it's going to happen by next. No, they're going to have to do their thing, and they should. Safety will be the predominant aspect of this, and we will build this aircraft to fit those needs, because we cannot have, we are aviation geeks, and we're going to get on this thing because it's so cool. But you got to get the real world to get out there, and you got to make sure they understand that it is indeed a safe product. And so, got to work through all of those things. But in the interim, the team is working on airport operations. We hired a guy that started an airline, so knows that whole process of building infrastructure, and it's just it's really fun to be part of something that it's at that nascent stage.
Yep. Well, let's take a question from Michael Duke. He's a founder of a revolutionary aircraft company here in Utah, doing short takeoff and landing with an electric propulsor. So he's asking, why are there not more significant advancements in conventional aircraft? Why is all the attention on vertical lift, and why are we not seeing Airbus, Boeing, and others do more with conventional takeoff and landing? And how can companies who are doing work in that space connect with the Uniteds, the airlines of the world, or the OEMs, Boeing and Airbus?
So this is just observation and opinion, and my experience in working with very large companies. We ain't that nimble. And well, we want to be creative. There's a lot of risk aspects of all of these things. And if you think of the time frame that we've had here over the last few years between the MAX issue at Boeing and COVID and the shutdown and all the things that the major players have been experiencing, the new, the MMA, the mid-level market kind of new aircraft that is all trying to be designed for people. All of that has gone by the wayside because it's just everybody back to the front of the line and get, let's start making the regular product. So there's a backlog of things that has probably slowed down a little bit of the innovation. The second thing, in any large corporation, it's just tough to make all that R&D investment in something that you don't know that there's going to be a lot of demand for, which is back to the question on why would United sort of approach companies like Boom and Archer initially. It's like, well, let's let others do that. Let's get on the ground floor and support them and get our orders in so that we can indeed lead the innovation. So I think it's a little bit of risk aspect, risk assessment, cost involved, building this large organization. I mean, I'm very familiar with both companies and the cost required for all the R&D, the staffing, the people. It becomes a thing. And this is a very silly example. I recognize that. But here's the other thing. It's just, we don't make aircraft at United. Boeing does. But I always think of the marketing case study a long time ago that I read about Campbell's soup. And it's like, wouldn't it be great if Campbell's soup made chili? It's like, yeah, same concept, right? And so Campbell's soup went out this whole thing, laid out all this big brand of chilies, and it flopped miserably because chili and soup ain't the same thing. And people associate Campbell's soup with hearty soup and all that, but for some reason, chili just did. And so I think to some degree, I know, like I said, it's a silly example, but if you're Boeing, if you're Airbus, I think you want to test the market out there. And there's just I don't think there's a philosophical, Michael, that asked the question. I don't think there's a philosophical thing that these things are not something we should do. There are some very revolutionary, when you first see them, you're like, well, what the heck is that? The other thing would be, I think, scaling and commercial usage, because I know when we buy aircraft, we go in there and we're fairly discerning about everything, right? The interior, avionics, the range, how many seats we have in there. And I think possibly some of these new designs that I've seen out there probably conform to that, but no one's really adapted that. So I think things like this are going to be able to create more of a market. And so I would not give up yet. I just think it's just one of those things where possibly it's an idea before it's time to capture not only the hearts and minds, but the purse strings of the big players in the situation they find themselves right now.
Oscar, I know you've been outspoken in the past on what you think the FAA should do to modernize operations. Can you speak to what you think they should be looking at over the next few years?
Yes. Modernization is probably an understatement. We need a new system. And my numbers may be dated, but last I checked, there was close to 50 other countries that have a more modern air traffic control system than the United States. Why wouldn't we do that? It's costly, it takes time, it's owned by the government. There's a lobbying group, a very strong lobbying group of smaller private aircraft folks that oppose it. And so it's become a political hot potato in a lot of places. So those are all the issues that are surrounding this. But I think for me, the biggest decision that has to be made is whether it's a privately funded organization that drives this change or it's to stay federally funded. And I lean towards private, and it's not because, government can't do anything or whatever. The concept of this, and there's many models out there, and I don't have a particular favorite, or I'm not technically capable to tell you which one is better than the other. I know that there's some out there. To develop that is going to take some time, and it's going to take more time than a president will sit in his administration. And therefore, whatever project is started is probably going to have to go over a couple, if not 3 administrations or 3 terms of a president. That's a lot to ask for, a federally funded budget that you're going to build this organization, get all this budget in essence to do that. And then the next president comes in and says, that's nothing. I'm going to nuke that. It's not working. because it's not going to work in the first few years. It's going to be a lot of, skunk works, if you will, to get all this working. And so the concept of having something funded over that course of time in the federally funded system, I just think is very, very difficult and probably not likely to happen. On the private side, you could do that. And then think of the people that you want working on this. Like I talked earlier about the people that come to Archer because of the cool, innovative, exciting thing that they're building. We pay them, and they have a possibility of upside as Archer's equity sort of does what we hope it does over the long run. And so there's something in it for them. They're working on cool things, and there's money to be made. Federal government is not going to be able to do those sorts of things. So a privately funded organization, led by some of the brightest minds in aerospace and technology and all that, if we could create that, we would have it built quicker and more efficient and better. But again, there's issues where then it becomes operated by the FAA. And all of those things are out there, some political, some philosophical, very much economics engagement and involved. But those are the issues that face us, and that's why it just doesn't go anywhere. And so my concept is, if you want to stop talking about delays and all the things that consumers want to talk about, you got to fix the core. What is the root cause? And we are slowing aircraft. It takes, for all of you that are historians, take any OD pair, go between Washington, D.C. and New York. I mean, it's a 20-minute flight, maybe. Why do we have an hour and a half schedule for it? Why has that hour and a half schedule got that? Tarmacs, yes, all of these different things, but mostly it's because air traffic control has got to slow everyone down. And we could be so much more efficient as a nation if we're able to do that. That is a big thing. And people ask me sometimes, like, hey, would you want to go work at the FAA or whatever? It's like, not really. Would I want to go start something like this with the right group of people to do that? Absolutely, because I think this would be huge. I'm sorry, that was a political thing too there. It could be such a massive benefit to our economy in this country to be able to do the things that an efficient and safe flying mechanism would provide for us.
Well said. Well, Oscar, a couple final rapid fire questions. So here in Utah, we're building an inland port where rail and other modes of transportation can meet at a single place, co-located with Amazon and Walmart and other major warehouses. Given your experience, this is a question from the audience. Given your experience with rail, leading a major rail company before United Airlines, do you see a future where rail and electric vertical takeoff and landing intersect, or even short takeoff and landing, in terms of moving goods and people?
I think of the current capacity of an eVTOL, right? It's just like a few people. So people, not so much. There are some eVTOL like heavy haul aircraft things. So rail handles large, heavy, dense volumes, right? Forget the Amtrak aspect of that, because that's just not an operational. I love them, but it's just. If you were to rank us around the world, what our passenger rail service would be, we don't even make a list of the top 100. Again, I'm being dramatic. But the concept of intermodal facilities and rail and trucking and all the warehouses with the e-commerce thing have been proven. There's a big one in Texas that one of the railroads started a long time, BNSF. So how does this? I can't think of a way at this juncture of how they would be beneficial to each other, because
given the mismatch
of size and capacity and need, right? And it's like, why drop it up? So I don't see that. I'm sure there's a lot of smart people out there say, oh, you're full of this, you could do this, this, and this. I would love to hear that, and I probably would agree with you. I just can't think of anything right now, given the nascent nature of some of the stuff that we were talking about today.
No, that's a great response. Another rapid fire question. Any states or departments of transportation that are leading on advanced air mobility? I know the governor of Illinois did a statement on behalf of Archer some months ago. Anywhere else that you see is doing well with this?
Well, we're gonna try this in some big dense cities, LA, which has a cool factor and a traffic problem. Miami, increasingly the same thing. Southern communities don't have to worry about weather necessarily. So those people are embracing it. I think our plate is full from a political spectrum with all our our political leaders around. So they probably have bigger fish to fry. This is another concept that I always say: proof, not promise. Once this begins working, and let's say we'll try in Chicago as well, then like Katie bar the doors sort of thing, because everybody want to jump on it. And part of developing these things, we that's how we think. It's like, gee, if this goes from 0 to 60 in 1.2 seconds, we got to be ready. So we're building manufacturing facilities, thinking of all that scale, but not thinking about it too much, because we got to build the darn thing first and get it approved. So that's the beauty of developing kind of a startup and moving it to that. But I think there's going to be an increasing number of political leaders that see the benefit. It's got sustainability. It's got consumer concepts. It reduces city traffic, right? Infrastructure on the road that needs to be done and expensive. Do we have an ability to extend those? So the benefit to many, and again, this aspect of affordability is also, so it's not for the rich and famous. It's for pretty much everyone. And so I think all those factors are wonderful talking points. So if I'm a political leader, it's like, oh, I'm leading the way on sustainability and accessibility. And you can see that being a good stump point. And so the people we talk to generally are worthwhile. Again, our DC office tend to be a little bit divided on a lot of things. So it's a little bit more of a struggle, not because the product isn't a cool thing that we should do, but they're all worried about, what does that say? If I'm too forward on this, does this make me left leaning and woke because it's sustainability? And it's like, God, I hate that. I hate that argument.
It doesn't need to be politicized.
Why can't we do the right thing? Why can't you have a thought about relieving traffic on the road through something like this and not make it political, but just being a benefit for your constituents? And we have a hard time doing that. And I know that. So that's the battles we have to fight.
Well, that's a good note to end on. I think we need more collaboration, less politicization. So thank you, Oscar, for your time. This has been super enlightening. We hope to have you back in the state of Utah at some point soon. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Matthew Moss, our Director of Aeronautics, for speaking as well. And everybody have a great day.